All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we are going to get started right away with Carla Torgerson talking about, is your microlearning learner-centered and why it needs to be? So Carla, I will toss it over to you to get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. And thank you everybody who is here today. Super excited to be with you. And I've already been watching some of the things coming in the chat. I think when you were in the main room and now over here in room A, I believe we're in. So thank you so much for being here and for joining us. All right, I'm just going to share my screen. It'll just take a moment to load there. There we go. So again, we're going to talk about microlearning and particularly why it should be learner-centered. This is a pretty big interest area of mine of late. So again, my name is Carla Torgerson. I am the head of learning experience strategy at TorranceLearning. And a little bit about my background. I have been in the consulting space for the better part of about 15 years. And I've also worked in large organizations as well. So I've worked on the vendor side, doing lots of really interactive and learner-centered learning. And also I understand the politics and some of the challenges that come from being in the large organizations as well. So with that, also I have had a really strong interest just in e-learning and the learner experience, which has brought me into topics like mobile learning, and now microlearning is a really big thing for me as well. So if you're interested, my contact information is there on the screen. At the very end, I'll also have a QR code so we can connect on LinkedIn. So if you're familiar with me or my work, you might know know me from my books. I've written both of these ones, and I also have chapters in these. And more than that, I want to get to know who's here. And so I've got some questions for you. The first one is, what's your role? I'm going to ask you some options and ask you to type in the chat. First one is, are you a learning technologist, an instructional designer, a learning leader, something else? You can put all of the above, jack of all trades, whatever works for you. But tell us who's here. So I see instructional designer, learning leader, learning advisor, a little of everything. Yep. Learning experience designer. ID. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. IDs and learning technology. Awesome. Awesome. Just give another moment for a few more to come in the chat there. All right. So it looks like for the most part, we've got a lot of folks on this left-hand side, the learning technology ID side of things. But we do have a few folks from all, the learning leaders and some other things as well. And it sounds perfect, right? If we're thinking about micro-learning and particularly how do we do this and get tactical about it, I think you're in the right place. So this is great. Thank you, everybody, for responding there. Oh, wrong mouse button. There we go. Sorry. All right. Now, I have a couple more questions for you. First one is, what is your experience with learning and development in general, that field of training and development? Go ahead, use your air meet emojis to let me know. None, a little, quite a bit, a lot. This is highly unscientific, of course, but it's a good chance to see where you are, where you're at. Seeing a lot actually of the a lots and quite a bits. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so lots of folks with a lot of experience in the learning and development field. And struggling a little with my second monitor here. Apologies. There we go. And now my next question is, what's your experience specifically with microlearning? Same question, scale, using your emojis to vote, lots or little. Saying, okay, this is what I was expecting. a lot more variety here, right? Even those who have a lot of experience with training and development in general, microlearning is new. So I'm looking for you guys to throw good stuff in the chat, ask really good questions as well, all that good stuff. Okay. So now my question for you is this. Why should we make our microlearning learner-centered? Go ahead, type in the chat. Why do you think it's important to be learner-centered? I'm seeing some great things coming in the chat here. Christine, I love what you said. If it's not learner centered, then what's the point, right? If it wasn't built for the learners, then why are we here, right? And it's interesting. I was talking with a group just yesterday, actually, about virtual instructor-led classes, and I said, if you can have the class without the students there, then you're not teaching. And I truly believe that. And the same goes for my beliefs about e-learning and microlearning, even when you're asynchronous, right? Like if this isn't for the learner, if this experience isn't designed with them in mind, then you're probably missing the boat somehow. Yeah. And I will add also that my belief, and founded on a lot of research on learning, is that when the learner is not engaged and they don't see the value of the learning for them, they're not likely to learn very much, and they're not likely to transfer those new skills to their jobs either. And so, unfortunately, this guy over here, he's probably not learning a whole lot, right? This lady over here, she's probably getting something from this experience. And so it brings me to my point here, which is, for her, this is a good use of her time, right? For this guy, unfortunately, when asked, at the end of the day, did he have a good day? Was his time used well? He'd probably say no. And I think originally a lot of people started going shorter. They started going to microlearning because it was in a response to try to provide greater value, right? More in less time. And I've got a question for everybody here in the room. How many of you have ever been, whether you've watched a 5-minute video, whether it was on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, whatever the topic, you thought it was going to be interesting, 5 minutes, that was it. And somewhere in the middle of watching it, you thought to yourself, this is not a good use of my time. And if you had the opportunity, you may have closed it, maybe watched to the end. But the question is, have you ever had one of those moments where you're like, this is not a good use of my time? Go ahead, throw it in the chat. Give me a Y or an N. Has that ever happened to you, watching what should be very short, 5 minutes or less? And then you're like, wait a minute, not a good use of my time. Go ahead, type it in the chat, a Y or an N. Yes or no? Oh, there it comes in. It was really delayed. I was like, wait a minute, only Christine's answering? Oh, here we go. Yeah, that's what I was expecting. Thank you. Yeah, Christina. Yeah, well, constantly, right? Yeah. And the point here is we're in the chat, all of us here are saying this. Yeah, of course we've experienced that. And so then I would say, unfortunately, this guy does it too, right? And so when we're not using his time well, he knows it. And he knows it like that. And so the point here is that the more learner-centered we are and the more learner-centered we can be, the less likely we are to provide something that's just not very valuable to our learners. All right. And so now you've got my soapbox, right? Learner centricity is really important. So then we're already well into our session, but what are we really going to do today? Now that we've set that foundation, we are going to quickly define microlearning, and then we'll talk very briefly about 4 use cases and 20 ways we can go micro. And I'm going to work you through an activity where you'll be able to find at least one of those, and you'll have something in mind that you can do with your work. And then we're going to say, okay, I'm going to give you some tips and techniques to understanding the level of motivation of your learner and how you would be really learner-centered. So ultimately, my goal for today is that you will leave empowered to be able to capitalize on microlearning to improve performance in your organization, that you're going to have, hopefully, again, we've got watching my time, as is Erin for me, 30 minutes or less. And my hope is that you're going to walk away with at least one good idea that you're like, oh, yeah, I've got something cool, a good takeaway that I can use. Go micro in my organization. I've got a good idea. So really, in a million different content that is purposely shortened to enable the learner to fit learning within their work and personal lives. And to me, that's really important. First of all, that content has been purposefully shortened. We didn't just take the 60-minute course and break it into 12 pieces, 5 minutes each. It's still 60 minutes, right? We're thinking carefully about what the learner really needs and how we provide them just what they need, hopefully sequenced or in a way that they can access it on the job when they need it. And thus, it will fit within their work and personal lives. And so I always hot right now, but all of what we're talking about has been grounded in a tremendous amount of history and techniques that we've known for a long, long time. So again, everything old is new again. Amazing wrist radio, right? It's $298. And now we have the new and improved amazing wrist radio. And it's a little more than $298, right? And I feel like microlearning is like that too, right? We didn't call it microlearning 50 years ago, but a lot of these concepts and ideas and principles that we're basing on have been around for a very long time. And so just saying that because I think that a lot of people think that microlearning is brand new and so different. And in some ways it is, but in some ways it's also grounded in a lot of things we know work. And so this isn't just this untested thing. So I'm going to share with you 4 uses of microlearning. To me, like I said, I think everybody's got a different definition. And as I talk to people and hear what they think about in terms of microlearning, I think what happens is they all are doing something different and they all say they're doing microlearning, right? And so the point here that I'm trying to make is from everything I've looked at and when I talk to people, whatever, all the different ways you can go micro fit into one of 4 use cases. And so we'll share those use cases, and then I'm going to share their common names because they're probably going to be familiar for you. And then actually I'll also share very quickly recommended seed times for each one, because every time I don't talk seed time, somebody asks about it. It seems to be really popular. So the first one is preparation. This is when we do micro-learning material or objects, and they're there to get ready for a longer form instruction. Okay, so you're doing micro-learning in support of a longer form, whether it is a classroom or a virtual class or even an e-learning. And my next one is follow-up. That's when you do something micro to follow that class, right? That the idea that you've got longer form instruction, whether it, again, a classroom, in person, a virtual classroom, an e-learning module, whatever it is, you have something that's longer. And now you're using microlearning to follow up. The next one is standalone. This is when you have single pieces of microlearning that stand entirely on their own. There is no class before or after, they just stand alone. And then the last one is support. This is when the learner is back on the job and we're using microlearning to help them do their job better. Now, again, anytime you hear somebody talking about going micro or using microlearning, they're going to be talking about one of these four things. The trick is that everybody says they're doing microlearning, and each of these is actually pretty different. So just keeping that in mind. And again, I'll now share the common names you might hear people use to describe these. Now, again, they'll call them all microlearning, but if we start getting more nuanced, the first one is pre-work, right? We have done pre-work for decades. This idea of having homework before you come to class, right? Follow up, when we talk micro, often people are talking about boost learning. And this is a concept that is, there's a lot of people talking about this. I really like Art Cohn's Cohen's work on this. Now, Erin, I got a private chat from you. There have been some hiccups on my internet, and now I'm seeing, oh, are we seeing my presentation okay? If you can see it, just give me like a yes. And okay, thank you, Erin, as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so again, the boost learning is when we've got things after or supporting longer form instruction. And again, I really like Art Cohn's work in this area. And here, I can throw that in the chat as well. And then the next one, now again, Erin, I'm seeing a couple questions in the chat. That's definitely not the slide I'm on. So if maybe you can offer some help in the chat there. Now, the next one that people use, there it comes, is short. I call it short form learning. Again, I don't have a really good name for those standalone pieces other than to just call it short form learning. Now, the last one is called performance support. And again, we've been talking about performance support for quite a long time. In fact, Gloria Gary was doing work on this in, I believe it was the 1980s. That is 40 years ago now. So, and where I'm going here is that I actually think that performance support is important and really amazing. And now that we're talking a lot about microlearning, I think performance support is going to come forward and get a little bit more attention, which I'm really excited about. So whenever you're going micro, you're likely to be going micro in one of these ways. Now, again, just really briefly, people often ask me about boost learning. Art Cohn says your boosting should be no more than a minute. That 1 minute is equally effective. In fact, he found 30 seconds to be equally as effective as a 5-minute boost. So you can go really super short. With short form learning, I actually divide it into two categories. The first is your informal learning. This is the stuff that the learner is not required to take. And if they are not required to take it, the research is pretty clear that about 4 minutes is where it tops out. Now, I've tried to hold myself to that standard with stuff that's required, and usually we have a little more we're trying to do, so I go for up to about 8 minutes. And then with your performance support, it can be really super short, like at a glance while they're on the phone with a customer, which is like a 15-second thing, or it could be up to 5 minutes if they're pausing their work for a moment. So again, these are just some recommendations there. Now, here's the question for you. I want you to think about the work you do in your work. Think about kind of a meaty content area and ask yourself, could I go micro, or maybe I already am. I know a lot of you already are. Can I or am I going micro in one of these ways? What I'd like you to do is go ahead, again, vote with your tools. Show me which one or ones could you go micro in your work? I'm seeing those votes. Awesome. I think I've seen every icon here, so great. Awesome, awesome. And so this is this case for going micro. And now that you know that use case, I want to get really tactical. What we'll do is we'll go from the 4 use cases to the 20 ways you can go micro. So there are 5 formats. Yeah, Erin, I noticed that pause as well. If you want me to turn my camera off, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just continue as I am. So we've got the 5 formats of microlearning, and this comes from my book. And so what we found was that text-based resources is a common way to provide learning, right? Like PDFs or newsletters or blog posts or things like that. And then we've got e-learning modules, right? We've kind of bread and butter for us, often as instructional designers, right? Videos, we can certainly make good videos, right? Infographics, which to me is underutilized and could be used a lot more by learning professionals. And then the last one, I always smile a little bit because this was, when we wrote the book, this was perfect. It's getting a little dated now, but at the time, podcasting was huge. So I say, any other emerging technologies, use this 4th one as your bucket for kind of anything that's new, right? And the point here is you've got like 5 different formats, and you could go micro using any of these. And the beauty of this is that it brings us to the 20 ways we can go micro, right? For every use case, right? Each of these use cases, you also could do your content in each of these formats. Now, different ones will work better in different cases, different places, different content, but you've got 20 ways you can go micro. And now I'm going to turn it back to you, right? And here's where it hopefully gets really fun for you, is that I want you to think, you told me your use case already. You have a place you can go micro, or you already are. I want you to look at this and say, okay, so for that one that I chose over here, now if I think about one specific concept that I could teach, one learning objective, would it be text-based, e-learning, video, infographic, right? Now, again, these can mix and match. Of course, you can put a video in an e-learning and whatnot, but let's just kind of go with that for now. Go ahead, type in the chat. Give me a number. Give me any number. What's the one that you would focus on? All right, I see number 19. Oh, the infographic for performance support. Thank you, Joey. And I love infographics for performance support. Huge fan of that. Okay, let's see. I'm seeing the video for performance support. Oh, here they're rolling in faster now. Awesome. All right. Seeing 12. Oh yeah, the standalone e-learning, standalone videos. Yep. And let's see. Lucy, you're saying follow-up podcasts. Awesome. I'm hearing text-based for preparation. 18 and 19, the videos and infographics for performance support. Awesome. All right. And the point here is none of these are the right or wrong answer, right? The point is that you know your content and your audience and what you're trying to achieve. This just gives you a framework and a guidance to help you figure out where to go, right? Now, what I want you to do is hold on to that. Remember that number or numbers you've put in here, right? You've got kind of the way you're going to go micro. Hold on to that, because now we're going to ask ourselves, how do we make that super learner-centered, right? So you've got your piece of microlearning, whichever one it is awesome, right? You know your organization and your needs the best. So whichever one you've chosen, now the question is, how do we make it learner-centered? My first question is kind of the learner centricity part of things now. So the first question is, what's your goal? Are you looking to share information, or are you looking to change performance? Now, I know, I get it. All of us want to be over here. And if you ask a training person, they'll always say they're doing this. But I can tell you, as somebody who's been an instructional designer for more than 20 years, that I've sure had my share of projects over here, right? It just is. So where on my scale are you? And again, no judgment in either direction. Where are you? Give me your emoji. And if you've already given it, please give it again so I can take a closer look. Awesome. I'm seeing a lot of people over here. Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. And it is this. What's the learner's level of motivation? And again, be honest with yourself, because sometimes our learners are much lower than we wish they were. Sometimes they're super high, right? So again, let's see how those votes come in. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of the sunglasses coming up. Okay. And a few folks over here. Awesome. Okay. So we're sort of in the middle, but what I'm hearing is like more leaning to the left side of this. Oh, and now I'm starting to get a couple of the really lows, but I'm getting a couple of really highs, right? Classic, right? The point here is you really need to know your audience and your learners, right? And when you know your learners, you hopefully will be able to provide a much better experience for them. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take these two scales and we're going to put them together. Now, my experience has been that generally, if I'm sharing information, we've got low motivation. And generally, if I'm changing performance, we've got high motivation. Now, sometimes those aren't matching, right? Sometimes I'm very, very motivated to learn the policy and I need to just read that information and I'm super stoked about it, right? And then there's other times when I know I have to change my performance, but I sure as heck don't want to, right? In either case, like I said, generally my experience is that they kind of align, but if they don't, motivation is what's going to trump this. Your motivation will be the most important part of that scale, right? So now what I want you to do, we're going to go back to that topic you were talking about. You gave me some votes on your two scales. And I want you to think about that one piece of content that you voted on, or you gave me one or two numbers in the chat. For your learner, for this piece of content, where would you peg your learners? Where are you at? Go ahead. Give me a vote in the emojis. All right, I'm seeing a lot of kind of in the middle again. I'm excited to see how many people are on the top half of this. That's fantastic. That's awesome. All right. So now that you know where you're kind of aiming for, I'm going to give you some tips for both the left side of the scale and the right side. So if you're on this left side, and I noticed a number of people were more on the right side. So, I recognize that probably more of us might be interested in the second half. But if you're on the lower side, here's a few tips for you. First one is to create a with them or what's in it for me, right? They may not really see the value for being here. And so you want to tell them why this information matters. And it might matter to the organization or it might matter to them, right? So for example, if you're doing a compliance course, it could just be that as an organization, we just don't want to get the pantsuit off of us, right? And I know a lot of people talk about the with them should be about the learner, but I think here, people come to work, they want to do a good job. And if you position it that this really helps our organization, you can help to bump this low motivation up at least a little bit. And then focus on actionable things they might care about, right? Let's try to make this as actionable as possible. And then focus on their short time investment. Again, we're going micro. So you can say things like, In just 10 minutes, you'll learn, right? Or if it's a performance support document, at the top, it can say, 3-minute read, right? Give people a sense, especially if they're not particularly motivated, focus on how quickly you're going to give them what they need and get them out because they'd rather be somewhere else. If you've got especially like if it's an e-learning module or a video, you want to give indications of progress so they know how close they are to the end. 10 minutes is actually a fairly long chunk of time, right? So give them a sense of how close they are to being finished. And if you're doing any sort of nudging or a curriculum of objects, so you're sending regular emails to remind them of things, you want to focus on that with them again, right? Why are we here? Why do I need you to do this? Why am I asking you to engage? And so then we can look at the flip side. But before I go on, are there any questions? You can feel free to throw things in the chat if you have any questions. And I'll go on to the other half of this, but if you've got questions, throw them in the chat. So flip side of this, forgot one. Rewards is also really important when you've got low motivation people, right? That's why we make courses required. It's also why we give prizes and incentives and things like that for completing courses. Okay, let's look at the other side. I know we've only got about 8 minutes left, so let's look at the other side of this. If they're a little bit more motivated, generally now we're talking about the learner's why, right? Why does this matter to them? And I used to work in a healthcare setting, and we always talked about the why, the learner's why. And when you've got somebody who's motivated, there's a reason, and you can tag into that. And so, for example, actually, right now, I'll share that I'm actually doing Duolingo to learn Spanish. It's been kind of a pipe dream of mine for years and years. And finally, I bit the bullet. My family's doing it with me. And I'm actually almost a whole year in, almost 365 days of every day doing at least one 5-minute lesson. And I get little pop-ups on my phone pretty much every day reminding me of my why. You really want to learn Spanish, don't you? Yes, actually I do, right? And so focus on that why. Why does this matter to me? And then focus on actionable things or examples that they're likely to care about. You're not trying to get me as bought in here, but you're trying to show me how doing this gets me to my why. And then focus on the value for their time. So you'll notice a little shift in our language here. After just 10 minutes, you'll be able to do X, Y, or Z, right? We're going to get you to your why. We're going to, not just your why, but we're going to help you achieve that goal. Make it as mobile friendly as possible. Those highly motivated learners will want to engage anytime, anywhere. The other guys, they're not going to do this at the coffee shop or waiting in line at the grocery store. But these guys, the highly motivated ones, they might. And if you're doing encouragement nudges, again, you can focus on the why. And social features. This is where social features can have a place as well. If you can put them together, those like-minded, highly engaged, excited to learn this people, that's where your peer groups, your social features, your collaborative groups can really do well. And the folks in the other half of it, you don't need a discussion group about the new compliance policy, right? Because nobody's going to go and talk down on that one, right? But it will work with the things they're really excited about. So then taking those, you've got your tips and ideas for whichever side you're on. Now I'm going to leave you with just a few overall things as we wrap up for today. So the first overall recommendation is ask yourself this. If I was the learner, what would be helpful or interesting to me? Provide that and nothing more. And ask that relentlessly. What do they need or what do they want? And don't give them anything more. And then also recognize that even really motivated people expect to use their time really well. So Their content should be specific, targeted to what they need. It should be brief. It should be interesting, right? And I asked you at the beginning of the session today, how many of you have ever watched a 5-minute video and felt, man, this is a waste of my time, right? And I got all these yeses coming in the chat, right? Even when it's something you think you want, you're going to be watching your time usage. So be very specific to what they need, be brief, and also be interesting. And as we think about that interesting, that's where strong user experience and graphic design comes in, right? Make it feel inviting, engaging, especially that it would be easy to use. And where we can, and for performance support, this is like critically important. You want to place those resources as close to the moment of need or their moment of curiosity as possible. So that moment when they're doing the job and they're like, this isn't working right. Or that moment when they go, I wonder about, right? We would like to place our resources as close to those moments as possible. And that's hard. That's really hard. But that would be our aspiration, is to figure out how to give it to them when we know they will need it. And in fact, the moment of need, if you're familiar with Bob Mosher and Con Godfredson, that's their concept, that moment of need idea. And they've got some really cool things around that, especially for performance support. So then, just sort of wrapping it all up, regardless of how you're using microlearning, which of the 20 ways, how learner-centered you are, the real question to ask is, how am I adding value for the learner? And to me, it's all about this question, right? How do I add value for the learner? Because it doesn't matter how I slice and dice all of these different ways to go micro. As long as that piece that I'm creating adds value for the learner, I'm going to be in good shape. And so if you're interested in more, I do teach the Microlearning Certificate Program for ATD. I mentioned my books. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to chat with people on that platform as well. So you can actually grab your phone right now. You can scan that QR code and we can be friends on LinkedIn if you would like. And so I will hold there. We actually have 2 minutes left, which, given some of the technology issues, we've some of that bumpiness, I wasn't sure if we would have extra, but I am super glad. If anybody has questions, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm also sticking around. I'm going to be in one of the lounge tables afterwards as well to answer questions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
All right, thanks so much, Carla. We appreciate it. That was a great session, and hopefully I think everyone has something to take away with them. So we are going on a 10-minute break. So feel free when the session ends to sit down at a table, sit down and do some networking, or go grab some coffee, take a break. Up next at 1:25, we have Connie Mohammed in this room. Or hop over to Room B and check out the session there. So thank you all, and thanks again, Carla.
Thanks so much, Erin. And like everybody else, I'm going to go in. If anybody wants to, I'm going to go into that lounge area as well. So I'll be there to chit chat if anybody has questions. Thanks, everybody.